Good evening. I'm Spot On Weather meteorologist Matthew Euler, and welcome to this week's video. In this week's video, I talk about snow and society. Snow is one of those unique weather elements that can play a wide range of roles in our society. And I thought I would throw this comical image up to start the presentation this evening. Will Ferrell there in the movie Elf. You can see him gathering up all those snowballs when they're fighting there at the park in New York City, him and the boy there on the left. Snow plays a larger role in our society, and we'll go ahead and take a look at some of those aspects. I first want to start tonight's video off by talking about, some of the snow quotes, in literature of the past, as well as just historical artifacts. There are many different ways that snow inspires us. Just a couple of the quotes here. The first one from Wilson Bentley, who I'll talk about in this video. He was also known as a snowflake man. He said, always, right from the beginning, it was the snowflakes that fascinated me most. J.B. Priestley, he quoted, the first fall of snow is not only an event, but it is a magical event. You go to bed in one kind of world, and you wake up to find yourself in another quite different. And if this is not enchantment, where is it to be found? Next quote was from Rachel Cohn. She said, I love snow for the same reason I love Christmas. It brings people together while time stands still. Novalo Takimoto quoted, snow falling soundlessly in the middle of the night will always fill my heart with sweet clarity. And then John Burroughs, he said, it is the life of the crystal, the architect of the flake, the fire of the frost, the soul of the sunbeam. This crisp winter air is full of it. Cambria Hebert said the snow was endless, a heavy blanket on the outdoors. It had a way about it, a beauty. And then William Hamilton Gibson, he said, silently like thoughts that come and go, the snowflakes fall, each one a gem. So these are some of the quotes that I found researching the topic online, some really inspiring quotes about snowfall. So let's take a look at the overview of the presentation of snow in society. I'm going to start tonight's video by talking about the way that snow is classified, specifically snowstorms. And this is known as the Northeast Snowfall Impact Scale, NESIS. It takes into account aerial coverage of the snowfall, the amount of snowfall, as well as the population affected. That was developed by Cosin and Uccellini, and I'll get to that here to start tonight's presentation. I also want to emphasize, I'll do a little section there on how snow is dependent on the geography. Specifically in the United States, areas that rarely see snow will have much greater impacts as compared to those areas accustomed to it. Additionally, we see more immobility that occurs during snow than most any other weather events outside of, let's say, flooding. The heavier the snowfall, the greater the societal impact to transportation grids. It's just an example. It can completely shut down society. Next, the economic impacts. Wow, they can be great. Whether it's closing of businesses, the shutdown of schools, increased sales of items such as salt, shovels, snow blowers. It really has some huge economic impacts as well as losses in major winter storms. The big one here, to me, I can still remember when I was a little kid, growing up in the Midwest, and how I always looked forward to the snowfall. And I couldn't stay indoors. You couldn't keep me indoors if it was snowing outside. I would always love to go out and play in the snow one way or another, whether it was playing football with my friends and just kind of, getting tackled or slipping with the football in the snow as it first began accumulating on the grass, or, I was mesmerized by it. It was very hard for me. Some of you may relate to this. It was very hard for me to go to sleep at night when it was snowing heavy outside my window. I could just sit there and watch it fall that snowfall ever so gently all night long. It's just one of those events where I just don't get much sleep because I get so excited. I become like a kid again. And it brings out the kid in all of us. As many of us like to go outside and play in the snow, some of the recreational things I'll get into, such as sledding, snowball fights, whether it's building a snowman together, a lot of good quality family memories come from snow. And then, snow can also pose a severe threat to our health. Just as it enlightens us as a child, an example of that, shoveling of heavy wet snow. The heavier wet snow where the temperature is around 32 degrees Fahrenheit, that can result in an increase in heart attacks. They call this heart attack snow, where, the heavier wet snow, if you're not conditioned to go out there and do it, it can really cause some issues, especially in the older population in the United States. So you got to be careful as well with snow, the many threats to the health with it. So let's first talk about the classification of snowfall. And this is what's known as NESIS, the Northeast Snowfall Impact Scale. It was developed by Paul Cosin, who used to work for the Weather Channel. He works for NOAA. And Louis Uccellini, the National Weather Service Director right now. They wrote that book on Northeast Snowstorms, Volume 1 and 2, the monograph. A great, great book. If you ever get a chance, I probably should have just taken a picture of it and thrown it in here. It's a really great book, kind of describing snowfalls, past snowstorms from Virginia up through New England. Well, they developed this Northeast Snowfall Impact Scale back in 2004, which characterizes and ranks high-impact Northeast snowstorms, mainly focused on large areas of 10-inch snowfall accumulation or greater. And on this NESIS, there's 5 main categories. They range from extreme, crippling, major, significant, and notable. The scale uses the population information in addition to meteorological measurements. So, it's a very heavily populated area from eastern Virginia, the Hampton Road cities on up through, let's say, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, Boston. A lot of people live in that corridor right up I-95. Also, the scale gives an indication of a storm's societal impacts. And NESIS scores are a function of area affected, again, the amount of total snowfall, and the number of people living in the path of the storm. Now, the areal distribution of snowfall and population are combined in an equation. Now, I don't have the equation before you here on the slide, but you're more than welcome to Google that equation. I don't want to get too mathematical here. That equation calculates what's known as a NESIS score, which varies from 1 for smaller storms to over 10 for extreme storms. And this raw score is then converted into one of 5 NESIS categories, which you see below on the graph. For example, Category 1, there's a NESIS value associated with a Category 1 storm, and there's a description that's notable, ranging all the way up to Category 5, which has a NESIS value of 10 plus, extreme societal impacts. Now, this does measure also, the NESIS measures the potential for human and economic disruption. So a real interesting scale to measure these snowstorms and their impact. All right, so on the left, I'm showing the top 10 most notable storms on the NESIS scale. And then on the right, I have a couple graphics of some accumulating snowfall events. The first one, the upper right graphic, that shows the March 12th through 14th, 1993 snowstorm, which was a real doozy. Anybody living from Alabama, that far south, all the way up into parts of New York State and New England, this was a big-time snow. This was a big-time storm. It was a Category 5 on the NESIS scale. And what does Category 5 mean? That means a extreme impact to society. All right, very large area and very heavy snowfall. And we're talking about the dark blue shading there in the upper right is indicative of 20 to 30 inches of accumulating snow. Wow. Bottom right was a example of another notable NESIS snowstorm. That was January 6th to the 8th, 1996. This was a doozy of a storm. The dark blue shading on the bottom right graphic again indicates snowfall from 20 to 30 inches accumulation. Some of those red patches there on the bottom right, that indicates snowfall more than 30 inches. I mean, that is just phenomenal in parts of northwestern Virginia, into parts of West Virginia, even up into southern Pennsylvania. Now, on the left, I have the actual top 10 ranked storms according to the NESIS scale, and number 1 was that March 93 storm, which you see in the upper right-hand graphic there on the slide. Number 2 was the bottom right-hand graphic, the January 96 storm. Number 3 was an early March 1960 storm. 4 on the scale was a late January 2016 storm. Number 5 is the February 15, 2003 storm. Number 6, 1961, and then so on, right down the line to number 10. Number 10 is actually 1969 snowstorm. All right, so since 2000, let's just say since year 2000, the top 10 rankings according to the NESIS scale, we have 1, 2, 3. 3 out of the top 10, about 30% of the top 10 NESIS snowstorms occurred since the year 2000. Next, I want to talk about geography and how important it is. In late January 2014, there was a snowfall which totaled 2.6 inches over Atlanta, Georgia. Now, that is a heavy snow. I mean, anywhere in the South, you get accumulating snow. It's very unusual. To get 2.6 inches, the bottom right-hand graphic kind of shows you what happens on the roads. All right, this is one of the interstates there out of Atlanta. You can see traffic is at a complete standstill, just nothing but brake lights. Even the interstates are covered. Why is that? They just don't have the snow removal equipment that cities further north have. This kind of same snowstorm over Chicago would be minor. People would be driving through this no problem. The Chicago Department of Transportation would have plows out in the streets, plenty of salt on the roads trying to melt that snow and ice, and it would be no big deal to people who live in Chicago at 2.6 inches. So geography is important. If you look at some of the parking signs I saved on this slide, there's typical city signs such as no parking after 2 inches of snowfall, and then you got snow route. You definitely don't want to be parked on the side of the road when you get these heavier snowfalls. And many of you that live in the north know and realize this because those plows are just going to push the snow to the side right to your car. And it's going to be almost impossible to shovel your way out of that if you have your car parked on the side of the road as those plows come through and push the snow off to the side. Here's another couple examples of geography. Again, the upper right-hand graphic shows, I'm really focused on the deep south here. That March 93 storm was huge as far as, accumulating snows down to the Gulf Coast. I'm talking southern Mississippi, Mobile, Alabama, snow fell in Pensacola, Florida. I mean, this unheard of for those locations. You just don't see it much. And then even places like Birmingham, Alabama, I mean, they got hit hard. They got over 10 inches of snow out of that. Another storm would be the New Year's Eve storm in 1963, where 4.5 inches of snow fell on New Orleans, 15 inches at Meridian, Mississippi, and 10.5 inches at Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, which is down at the Gulf Coast. And that was on New Year's Eve 1963. The bottom right is actually, it shows before the Sugar Bowl was played that year in New Orleans, it showed these gentlemen trying to clear off the snow off the field before the game. They just don't have equipment to do this kind of thing normally down in the southern states. March 93, again, that was a powerhouse with snowfall to the Gulf of Mexico. These southern areas lack snow removal equipment, as I mentioned, to clear the snow from the roadways. This usually results in complete shutdowns of society for extended time periods. There may be no school and businesses may be shut down for 5-6 days. In the case of Atlanta here, going back to Atlanta, that January 2014 snowfall, these cars were stranded on the roadway all day, all into the nighttime. I mean, just unbelievable amount of hours. These cars were just stalled. Some people just left their cars and began walking. Right, and as far as snowfall and transportation grids go, I mean, snow plays a huge impact on society in this regard. You see a snowplow there in the bottom right-hand corner. Northern cities have plenty of them. Southern cities just don't have them. Depending on the amount of snow removal equipment that's available, snow can cause major flight delays at airports, or even result, if it's heavy enough, in complete airport shutdowns. Now, if the snow is heavy enough, airports shut down and they can strand thousands of travelers. And they do this each winter, these heavy snowstorms that come in. Even with airports that have equipment, sometimes it's not enough to keep up. with heavier 2 to 3 inch snow rates per hour on those runways. Above ground passenger trains are impacted. They usually can operate up at a normal schedule 4 to 6 with 4 to 6 inches of snow in most locations. They can still stay on schedule in those northern locations, but once in excess of 6 inches, services are impacted. Some of these train services may actually be canceled, rescheduled, maybe limited in service. Bus transportation limits, they are usually, that service is shut down or definitely impacted because of snowy roads. And then school systems, including school buses, they're shut down. For example, in Southeast Virginia, if there's any flakes of snow in the air, they just don't drive the school buses. They just don't drive, they don't risk it because of the ice and the snow, and there's just a lack of equipment to remove it. Here's some examples of some pictures of some transportation grids impacted by snowstorms. The one on the left there is above ground train system. You kind of just see them just sitting at a standstill there with all that heavy snow over the railroad tracks. They do their best to try to keep up with it with this removal of snow off the railroad tracks, but after a certain point it just becomes too much. On the right hand side there you see this father there with his children. I mean, this is a New York City memorable snowstorm. And that bus is going nowhere anytime soon. Look how high the snow is in the streets there. And that little girl on the right, she's just trying to climb over that snow just to get to the bus. So significant impacts on how we go about our business here. For cars and automobiles, over 70% of the nation's roads are located in snowy regions, which receive more than 5 inches of average snowfall on an annual basis. Nearly 70% of the U.S. population lives in these snowy areas. Snow and ice reduce pavement friction with the rubber of your tires on the car, and also impact vehicle maneuverability, causing slower speeds, reduce roadway capacity, and increase crash risk. When you go, people make a mistake usually when they're on snow-covered roads and they slam on their brakes, which then just locks their brakes, and then you just go sliding on the road. In addition to icy conditions as well, which can be just as deadly. Now, each year, 24% of weather-related vehicle crashes actually occur on snowy, slushy, or icy pavement, and 15% happen during snowfall or sleet. Over 1,300 people are killed and more than 116,800 people are injured in vehicle crashes on snowy, slushy, or icy pavement annually. The source of this information is the U.S. Department of Transportation. And you can see images here, upper left, that guy's trying to help get his car pushed out of snow. The graphic on the right shows a lot of slide marks there in some of those vehicles that are going up this snowy hill. It's just, snow can definitely be a scary thing as well. On the road, you got to be very cautious. Speaking of driving in snow, I will tell you this personal experience from December 2009 when I left the Hampton Road cities to head back towards the Midwest U.S. during holiday. And I ran, the graphic on the right shows the total snowfall accumulation, courtesy of the National Weather Service office in Raleigh, North Carolina. The purple shading there on that graphic on the right, that indicates snowfall on the order of 20 inches or greater. 20 inches or greater. I started out over in Hampton Road cities in the white area where there was no accumulation. It was just a cold rain in December. December 18th is when I left. And oh my goodness, I ran right into the heart of this snowstorm. And I was fortunate to get out to Western Virginia and find a hotel room for the night. It was coming down probably at 3 inches an hour rate of snow. It was extremely heavy. It was a very big snowstorm. I remember stopping at a gas station where the snowfall went all the way up to the base of a phone booth, which you really don't see many of those anymore because most people have cell phones. But that was pretty significant. That was probably about 18, 19 inches of snow when I pulled into a gas station. Luckily found a hotel for the night, got off that road. But it was one of the most treacherous trips I've ever taken due to snow. Upper left shows an actual image of that trip, and that's exactly what those cars look like on the side of the interstate. They were completely buried. I would pass cars. The interstate was covered up like I was driving in the country. and these cars were just buried. You couldn't even make them out. Even when I got to the hotel, it was just like this. In fact, there was so much snow in the hotel parking lot, I couldn't even pull into the parking lot. I had to stay parked well out on the plowed street near the hotel. And then you see the lady there in the bottom left. That was the morning after I woke up. And that's what people were dealing with, trying to find their car. I mean, it was just insane. This was a crazy, crazy snowstorm. So significant societal impacts. Many people got caught off guard that night in the heavy snow on that particular Friday night. And oh my, that was one to remember. Now let's turn to the fun side of snow. Oh my goodness. Snow, there's just no other weather element that gives you excitement. Quite like snow. I mean, rain is rain, right? Rain forms puddles, it's messy. You can't really throw a rain ball, right? You can't sled in rain. Look at these kids in the upper left. They're having a blast. I used to do this when I was younger, go on these huge semi-inner tubes and just slide down hills back in the Midwest. Oh man, it was a blast. Not sledding like Chevy Chase and Christmas Vacation, by the way. I mean, not quite to that extreme. But what a fun time it is when you can sled in the snow. Such wonderful family memories. You can cross-country ski like that gentleman in the upper right. Gives you good exercise. And get to enjoy the beauty of the snow around you. Of course, bottom left, this is a typical tradition for many families when it snows, is to go outdoors and build these snowmen in your yard. Get creative with scarves and what you're going to use to make up the eyes and the nose and the mouth. I used to love doing this with my own kids. So it's just a blast. And then, this transcends time and generations. Look at the lower right-hand picture. I mean, this one goes back to the 1930s. These people are out there playing in the snow. I mean, from young kids there in the far right to the older gentleman there in the center. They're all just having a good time playing in the snow, throwing snowballs at each other. I mean, snow brings out the kid in all of us. It's such fun. And then who can ever forget what they always dream of, right? I'm dreaming of a white Christmas. I mean, Bing Crosby said it best when he sang that classic holiday song. And then the weather outside is frightful, but the fire is so delightful. Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. And then, of course, Jingle Bells, dashing through the snow in a one-horse open sleigh. Wow. Christmas and snow, we always wish for it, right? We always wish we could wake up on Christmas morning and just have snow one of those days out of the year. If you look at the upper right-hand graphic there, by the way, I don't know if you've ever watched the Christmas movies on the Hallmark Channel, but I mean, come on. It always seems to snow in Hallmark movies, doesn't it? Yeah. If I could live in a Hallmark movie and have snow every day, I would love it. But yeah, that's just not realistic, right? Because sometimes we get cold or nasty rain instead of that snow. But it's just such a beautiful sight to see. The bottom right is from the classic movie A Christmas Story, and that's the final scene where Ralphie's parents are just sitting there by that Christmas tree all lit up, just looking out their window on Christmas night and just seeing that beautiful snow falling out their window. It's one of my more favorite scenes out of a holiday movie in general, is that snow falling there in the Cleveland area at the end of A Christmas Story movie. It is just amazing to see it just, Christmas is already a favorite holiday of mine, and then the snow. I don't know about you guys out there, but wow. So the holiday season, it's in the music. We're always hoping for a white Christmas. And speaking of that, this is the probability of a white Christmas. By the way, a white Christmas is defined as having 1 inch or more of snow on the ground on Christmas morning. So if it's a bare ground on Christmas morning, unfortunately, you don't meet the criteria. But on the graphic on the left, you'll see the probabilities of a white Christmas with that greater than 1 inch of snow on the ground Christmas morning. And you'll notice, obviously, the further north you go, the greater the probability. In those white shadings there in northern Minnesota, the upper peninsula of Michigan, northern Wisconsin, northern parts of New England, out in the mountainous areas there, the Rockies of the western U.S., as well as the Sierra Nevada there in California. Anything really south of Interstate 70, your probability of a white Christmas goes down drastically. Of course, in the deep south, sometimes we have those Christmas miracles, like we did in the Brownsville, Texas area. I can't remember the year that was, but it was an amazing time to have a white Christmas that far south. Now let's talk about snow and the economy. Now, significant storms preclude many workers from just being able to get to work, to drive to work due to the snow-covered roads. That can result in significant declines in the revenue for the duration of inclement weather. And if it's a really big snowstorm, this could go on for a week. So even longer amounts of time beyond just the snow when it was falling and making the streets slippery. Consumer activity is also usually suppressed during extreme snowfall. You'll have a flurry of activity in preparation for a snowstorm, increased sales in non-perishable food items, water, flashlights, in case you lose the power, snow shovels to shovel your sidewalks, generators in case you lose power, because usually some of the strongest snowstorms, which are known as blizzards, produce winds in excess of 35 miles per hour. Snow blowers to make take care of your driveway much easier. Instead of using a shovel, you can just put a snow blower out there on the driveway. And then winter weather apparel, whether it's scarves, hats, and gloves, heavy coats. All this is an uptick for some businesses, right? Snow removal can also cost lots of money. I mean, if you look at Buffalo, New York, for example, an area that gets lots and lots of snow on an annual basis, they budgeted $9 million for snow removal in the 2014-15 winter season alone. I mean, can you imagine a city budgeting $9 million for snow removal? I mean, that's saying something. But Buffalo, New York is also downwind of Lake Erie, and they tend to get a lot of snow. Significant storms tend to incite fear amongst the general population. And it's not just snowstorms that do this. Hurricanes tend to do this. Prior to hurricanes, people just raid shelves and hoard food and supply. The demand is much higher than the supply, so you see a lot of empty shelves. Just general big storms, hurricanes, snowstorms, supplies such as milk, eggs, and bread, the essentials usually run pretty low. And then also you get an increase in prescription drug pickups prior to these snowstorms at local pharmacies prior to them. So you will get a boost in sales, some of those pharmaceutical companies, before a snowstorm. This is an interesting one, snow and school closings. Okay, how many of you out there viewing this video have always wished for the magic word snow day? It's one of those joys as a child to see these words, snow day, flash across the TV screen when you see the updates on the closings. You just really look forward to it. Unfortunately, we're starting to lose snow days for school because of, the COVID pandemic and the fact now that a lot of schools are going to virtual means of teaching. So what used to be a slam dunk, I'm not going to have to worry about school and I can go out and play in the snow all day, is no longer, because, you can still get online and get your assignments and work on school stuff. But growing up for me, it usually took about 12 inches of snow to close school down. But boy, it's such an exciting time when you see those words, snow day, school closed. I've been disappointed too. I've gone to sleep at night and it looked like we were going to get socked with a huge snowstorm, only to wake up the next day and go to school like normal. The dry slot of a storm came in and just completely dried out. There was a dry conveyor belt that rolled right in and just missed out on the big snow. So there were some disappointments along the way as a child too, where you're thinking in the morning you're going to wake up to a world of white and it's still a bare ground, and you go to school like normal. But it's just so exciting as a kid. Now in the Midwest and Great Plains, school closings are more dependent on wind chills and the temperature readings. Back where I grew up in the Midwest, it took 40 to 60 below wind chills to close schools down. Just throwing that out there. Urban areas like Chicago and New York, they have more resources to clear snow, and often you have to have heavier accumulations to cancel school. But much of the southern U.S., you just mentioned snow in the forecast, and they're closing. This is a great chart here, a great map that shows the amount of snow necessary to close schools. And if you note the locations there up in the northern U.S., the dark blue shadings, Montana, North Dakota, northern Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, UP, Michigan, up into northern parts of New England, it takes about 24 inches of snow to close schools down. That's a lot. That's 2 feet of snow. The further south you go, for example, down in the green shading, the green coloring, it just takes any snow. I mean, you just mentioned it's going to snow, and immediately schools and businesses just start closing. They just don't have the snow removal equipment in those green colored areas if they get it. So there's a wide variety of necessary snowfall. Parts of the Midwest there, Iowa, Northern Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, that takes about 12 inches of snow to close schools. But it's just real interesting. The source of this, by the way, is Alexander Trubetskoy. He's the one who came up with this graphic. So it's a really cool graphic to show you the differences. And this is based on snow removal equipment and that geography aspect. As far as snow and health, now, as much as snow is really fun and can transform our worlds into as a Christmas song will say, a marshmallow world that we live in, there is an increase in car accidents, unfortunately. An increase in people falling and getting hurt, slipping on snow. Maybe there's a coat of ice underneath that snow, as well as back injuries from shoveling snow, maybe landing back on your tailbone wrong or lower back. And then I mentioned the heart attacks earlier from just shoveling snow. The heavier and wetter the snow, the greater the risk of heart attacks. Increased frequency of accidents from just slipping on snow and ice with cars on the road. There's two types of people on the road during snow, it really seems. Those that just continue to move as fast as possible. They basically have this overconfidence. They've grown up driving in snow, but the one thing they don't think of is how many other cars are around them during these snow events when the roads are snow covered. So yeah, you might have grown up driving in snow, but you might come from an area that is a country area with very little traffic. You might be living in an area with a major interstate system with a lot of cars, and you're still driving at the same speeds that you would with no snow on the road. Again, that's overconfidence. But you got a lot more cars and people around you to think about. And then you got the other type of people that just drive like 10 miles per hour on the interstate. And sometimes they're overly cautious. So, living in Southeast Virginia, I can remember just driving about 12 miles from work to home, and it took me just under 2 hours one night when it was snowing. It was insane. Which I'd rather have people be more cautious than anything. Head injuries, wrist fractures, hip fractures in older people are quite common due to slipping on snow. People lose their footing. We talk about hip fractures, especially in the older population. But you can land, you can slide on ice under the snow, and you can land on a wrist and fracture your wrist or fracture your arm. Got to get that put in a cast. You can fall back and hit your head really hard and get these nasty head injuries. In addition, when it's colder out with these snowstorms, the bigger snowstorms, you get stronger gradients and stronger winds and lower wind chills. You get this increased amount of use of these indoor space heaters. And you really have to pay attention to them for a couple of reasons. Especially if you have kids or pets in the area, in the house, you make contact with that space heater. It could definitely cause burns. In addition, those space heaters can sometimes tip over and result in fires in places. Thankfully, these have got more safety. They're more safety cautious space heaters these days as compared to like the 70s and 80s. Shoveling snow, again, can lead to those heart attacks. And the reason this is usually people aren't conditioned to be lifting this. I mean, the weight of heavy, wet snow is tremendous. And also, the colder air tends to constrict our blood vessels already before we even shovel the snow, reducing the oxygen supply to the heart. It's one of the body's reactions to colder weather. As far as snow and temperatures go, you'll notice that the air temperature, overlying air, tends to be lower or colder when you have a snowpack on the ground. And this is mainly due to the property of albedo, which is a non-dimensional, unitless quantity that indicates how well a surface is going to reflect that solar energy. And it ranges on a scale from 0 to 1. Now, snow happens to have the highest albedo, or reflectivity. It tends to reflect 90% of incoming solar radiation. This leads to colder daytime temperatures over a snowpack as compared to a bare ground with no snow. In addition, at nighttime, the Earth's surface tends to reach much colder temperatures. The overlying air mass over a snow-covered ground, that's mainly due to more effective radiational cooling processes because of snow. Well, number one, during the day, the sun energy is being reflected, so the air doesn't get very warm. So you're already cooler going into the hours after sunset and overnight. And so you generally have much colder temperatures at night with the snow cover. And due to its high albedo or reflectivity, surprisingly, people that go skiing on slopes, they don't wear sunscreen. And, due to its high albedo, the snowpack, sunburn, otherwise sometimes known as snowburn, it's quite common. So you could have a really bad sunburn on your face if you're not careful. You're out there skiing on the ski slopes. Wind chills are usually very low during major snowstorms, especially due to those increased winds. You get a tighter pressure gradient. Some of the more severe winter storms are known as blizzards, and you get winds in excess of 35 miles per hour. Here's a look at the U.S. average winter snowfall. Generally, you see the different shading associated with the different values in inches. In general, you'll notice the most snow is located over the Rocky Mountains out in the western U.S., as well as the upper Great Lakes area, downwind of the Great Lakes over places like I mentioned, like Buffalo and Syracuse, New York, western New York State, as well as those locations up in northern New York State into northern Maine. So generally, the snowfall ranges from just 2 inches down around the Dallas area all the way up to 60 inches plus in the purple shading right there in northern Wisconsin into the Upper Peninsula, Michigan, and northern New England. So quite a range of rates of snowfall. I believe this is my last slide. Yes, this is it. Okay, so I wanted to end tonight's video on snow and society in saying that no two snowflakes are ever alike. That's the beauty of it, right? So this gentleman, Wilson Bentley, he's known as the Snowflake Man. And, I encourage you, there's some books out there on Wilson. Go ahead and take a look at it. He really was fascinated by the patterns of the various snow crystals. He took detailed photos of snowflakes. And you'll see that those plates, that particular 1902 photo, all the different plates he took images of. And you notice all the different shapes of those snow crystals, right? He attached a bellows camera to a compound microscope. And he took more than 5,000 images of snowflakes in his lifetime. So really neat stuff. If you look at the graphic on the left, we talk about supersaturation in the vertical axis on the left, and then the temperature profile, the horizontal on the bottom. Different types of ice crystal shapes take place depending on how cold the temperature is and how much moisture is in the atmosphere. All right, so you could have dendrites and plates in extremely cold temperatures, as well as lower humidity. And think about this. You're going to have less absolute humidity in grams per cubic meter in a much colder air mass. The air just can't hold as much moisture in a colder air mass as compared to a little bit warmer air mass. Temperatures around 32 degrees Fahrenheit usually produce some of the heaviest snows because the capacity of the air to hold moisture is much greater than, say, at a temperature of 0 to 5 above 0. But in general, you can see on the graphic on the left, there's many different types of ice crystal shapes out there, from dendrites and plates to these needles and hollow columns, in addition to thin plates, solid plates. So, it all depends. How cold is the atmosphere? How much moisture can the atmosphere hold? And it's going to determine what type of snow crystal shapes form. All right, that wraps the video up tonight on Snow and Society. I've got a lot of exciting news to share with everybody out there here on the Spot On Weather channel, YouTube channel. I'm working on the finishing touches for the 2021-22 winter outlook, so I'm expecting to have that ready to go. I may divide it up into multiple pieces, but I'm looking forward to publishing that here very soon. So get ready for the 2021-22 winter outlook and what we're thinking for the upcoming winter. I'm very excited to announce that, as well as additional videos to come, including teleconnections discussions and how the teleconnections are playing into the upcoming weather patterns across the Mid-Atlantic as well as much of the United States. So there is plenty to look forward to. Cannot wait to share these with you. Again, thank you for subscribing to our channel. We have a passion for the weather, and we love to share it with you. No matter where you're watching this from, we love it. And we really hope you enjoy our videos. All right, that wraps things up at Spot On Weather, where we are showing you accuracy through precision. Have a great night, everybody. Take care, and God bless. Until next time.